Hello, this is my discussion post for Module 10, and I will start off by reading the research question. So, do young men living in different countries tend to differ in terms of marital status? So, for this particular study, we are using a chi-square test of homogeneity. And so, this chi-square test of homogeneity is used to assess if the distribution on a variable is the same across different groups. And the variable we are collecting data on is the marital status of men ages 25 to 29. And so I chose to do a sample of 200, and then the countries I chose to compare were Denmark and the US. So my outline for this sample study is I am drawing two independent random samples of men aged 25 to 29. Each sample has a size of 200. The first sample is a random sample from the population of all 25 to 29-year-old men living in Denmark. The second sample is from the population of all 25 to 29-year-old men living in the United States. So my null hypothesis is young men living in different countries tend to differ in terms of marital status. And then my alternative hypothesis is young men living in different countries do not tend to differ in terms of marital status. And then my conditions or assumptions for this hypothesis test include a counted data condition. So this is basically saying that each cell for the expected frequencies are above 5. So each cell includes counts for the categories. So these are all above 5. And then we can say that the sample is independent, the countries and the men, because we can just assume that, or I guess there's no reason to assume one man has any influence on another, and we don't think that there's a relationship between the two countries either. And then this is also a random sample. Um, and then, yeah, again, the expected cells or expected frequencies are greater than 5. Um, and then for the, since we were looking at the distribution, we'll go back to the raw data. So we're looking at the distribution, which is particularly the percentage of each country. So we are looking at the distribution or percents of a group and group 1 and comparing them to group 2 and seeing if they are more different than what we would expect due to random chance. So as you can see, there's more single men, 25 to 29 young men or single men living in Denmark than there is in the United States. And then there's more married men in the United States than there is to Denmark, and a little bit more of divorced or widowed in the US compared to Denmark. And then from there, I will go to my chi-square statistic and then my p-value. So the chi-square statistic is 22.85, which is a little large. It barely fit on this distribution, so I had to kind of go out to the tail end. And that was found by adding up the squares of the deviations between the observed, the observed data, or the observed frequencies and the expected frequencies, expected counts, and then divided by the expected counts. So again, that was, we were adding up the squares of the deviations between the observed and expected counts and then dividing by the expected counts. And then, so since we have 3 rows and then 2 columns, or 3 columns and then 2 columns and 3 rows, we can just subtract 3 minus 1 and then multiply 2 minus 1, and that gives us 2 for the degrees of freedom. And then our p-value is really, really small, so it's 0.00001. And so for that reason, based on the table, we can say that it's less than 0.001. And again, it's out there. And then because of this data, I did reject the null hypothesis because the p-value is so small. And so we can look at the standardized residuals and kind of see why it is so small. So the standard residuals tells us what the cell contributed to the overall significance on the Z-score. So as you can see, that which is highlighted right here, so married in the United States, it has the most impact on the overall results. And then there's more married men between these ages. And then in conclusion, and to let you know my decision, I chose to reject the null hypothesis that young men living in different countries tend to differ in terms of marital status. And then my conclusion is because the p-value was very small, I concluded that there really is no difference in terms of marital status among young men living in different countries. Thank you for watching.